This is it.
Okay.
Much better.
Ansel Adams is America's most revered photographer and the world's leading figure in landscape photography. An ardent conservationist, he has spent almost half of the century exploring nature and recording its grandeur in photographs. In this, he follows the path of three other great American photographers, Edward Weston, Paul Strand, and Alfred Stieglitz, all of whom had a profound influence on him.
Not bad at all. See, if I did it right, we have it at 640.
Right.
And the shadows I put on 3. And, well, I'm going to drop the shadows again down to 2. Well, now it'll be at 60 at the 20, at 32. But
I've got to use this extreme front f-stop scale. This is one of those 3 f-stop scales.
oh, that's right.
So
That would account for it only 4 times.
22, 32, do you want to
Yeah.
give it? Okay.
Born in San Francisco in 1902, Adams has never moved far away from the sweeping landscape of his native California. Exploring the landscape of Yosemite and the Sierra on foot, he began to record in pictures the wilderness he saw.
5.
Good.
He was soon hooked on photography and gave up a promising career as a concert pianist.
All right.
That's good.
This 10 2/3 are now placed on 2, and there's still a trace of detail. And the separation in the white.
The water's now.
Let's stand a few minutes, would be wonderful. But they sure have cut in on that other side. Very good. Good experiment.
Adams is considered one of the most outstanding craftsmen in photography. He often prints the same negative again and again in order to achieve flawless pictures of extraordinary tonal virtuosity, a technique which has earned him a worldwide reputation. His most famous prints, like the legendary Moonrise over Hernandez Valley, now fetch such high prices that Adams has decided to sell only to museums and institutions.
What made you decide to become a photographer? You started as a concert pianist.
Well, somebody said it more or less, an inevitable infection. I was trained as a pianist and spent the summers in the Sierra, pardon me, and photographing all the time. Primarily making records, visual diary. And finally, the pictures began to be a little interesting to me, and I was seeing things better. And I made a first rather good picture in 1923. And then I made my first really visualized photograph in 1927. But I was still piano, but the music was beginning to erode it a bit. And then I met Paul Strand in 1930 in New Mexico, in Taos, and saw his negatives, and that's what really turned me over to this decision to be a photographer. Then I tried to keep both the piano and the camera going for several years, but no, it has to be all or none. You can't do it.
Do you think the two things are related?
Well, I think it was the writer, Wadensky, who said that all art is the expression of the same thing. So the relationship, there's nothing direct any more than between painting and sculpture, but there's certain aesthetic principles which are automatic and not necessarily taught or formalized. And there is also in photography, or part in music, a very great necessity for discipline. That you've got to have the right notes.
Did you wait a very long time to achieve that particular image?
Well, we don't wait. We come across what is called the found object. That's my approach. In this case, I saw this tree, and I saw the sun, and I realized that it could be a very effective image. So I suppose after selecting the object, I perhaps waited 8 to 10 minutes simply to get an agreeable sun position. But that's all. This one is very strange. I think it's practically and totally a silhouette.
Cartier-Bresson says there is a precise moment for taking a photograph.
Yeah, well, he is an absolute genius in the anticipation of the moment. And he not only does that with an individual situation, a person, but he does it with many people. you have a group, several people, several things happening, and his mental computer is able to anticipate where everything is going to be. I mean, there's nobody like him. There's a few that approach, like Gene Smith, and well, there are a few others, but I think he is still the superb anticipator, I call it.
When you took this particular photograph, did you know in your mind's eye what it would turn out to be?
Yeah. Yeah. It was going to be a silhouette. I had hoped I could hold a little more definition here, but the light was changing very fast, and I trusted to memory rather than to another reading. I could have had a little more thing in here, but there's nothing in the negative, so it has to be printed very deeply. This is one of my earlier ones, and it's one of my most satisfactory. It happens to be very difficult to print because it was a poorly processed negative. It's taken with a very long lens on a 4x5 in the southern Sierra. It's called Precipice Lake. And it's a matter of being there at the right day and the right time. Just a few days later, this ice had melted, and the feeling had disappeared. And in this case, I was very anxious to emphasize this beautiful white door. And if I achieved higher value throughout, I lost the impact of the door. So it has a slightly mournful, intense feeling to it, which that's the way I saw it or visualized it.
Mr. Adams, this is one of your very first prints, isn't it?
Well, the negative was made in the early 1930s, but everybody seems to like it, and it's very nostalgic for me.
Why is it nostalgic?
Well, it's the experience of the place, and the whole southern Sierra is incredible. And this is what we call the Kern River Sierra, and this next one is in the upper Kern, that is northern, near the headwaters. I'm working here, I guess, about 12,000 feet, 11 to 12,000 feet. And it's just a moon sunrise. This is a setting moon. It's a very difficult thing to print, to get feeling of light, because if you get the moon lighter, you lose your sky. And it's very interesting that the rock here in the sun is much brighter than the moon, which is, after all, a very, very dark substance.
This is almost an abstract one, isn't it?
Well, you bring up an interesting point there as to whether you can actually have abstraction in photography, because you do have the inevitably realistic image of the lens. I like to use the word extract, and the shapes of nature are then organized in the camera, in the mind first, and in the format, and develop towards a formal statement relationship. It can't be abstract, it can be highly selective.
It cannot be abstract because I don't think you can photograph anything which isn't already inherent in nature.
You cannot do what the non-objective painter can do, can build up a series of impressions of abstract colors. We'll say abstract, I'm using that again in a different way. Impressions of color and shape, and integrate them. With the photographer's problem is to sort of establish a configuration out of chaos. And he has to think of his format and enclosures, relation of textures and values. But again, that comes, it's automatic. I can't sit there and contemplate, because by the time I finish the contemplation, the sand would be blown away, and I would be lost.